In this episode of the Zilliqa Observer, I'm going to be speaking with Michael Conn, the CEO of Zilliqa Capital. Hi Zillicans, I'm Chase Raz, a university instructor, corporate trainer, and consultant, and I'll be your host for this episode of the Zilliqa Observer. This is a longer episode, so let's do without the formality and get started right away. So with me today is Michael Conn, the CEO and Co-Chief Investment Officer for Zilliqa Capital. Hi, Michael. How are you?
Good. How are you doing, Chase?
I'm well. Did I get those titles right? First of all, CEO of Zilliqa Capital and the Co-Chief Investment Officer for Zilliqa Capital.
That's right. Amrit Kumar is the President and Chief Scientific Officer and co-founder of Zilliqa, is also my Co-Chief Investment Officer in Zilliqa Capital. So that's spot on.
Perfect. And I have a little bit more background I want people to know about you and verify is correct. But to understand Zilliqa Capital for a moment, when you mention that part, that arrangement, what I understand is that the two of you gentlemen are the main folks in Zilliqa Capital right now, and then you have a large board. Is it a board of advisors, or how? No, what's the structure of the board?
Sure. So as you mentioned, it's Amrit and myself. We're the main team, and then we have an actual board of directors around us. So these are actual directors that provide both deal flow as well as governance and over kind of site strategy as well. So if you see our board, and I can certainly jump into it a bit deeper, but these are all folks that are kind of long-term investors in the digital asset crypto space, some of which I've known for a number of years and worked together even from my days back in kind of traditional finance. But these are, investors, technologists, and entrepreneurs, and it's great to have them around the table with us on this journey.
Oh, good. Thanks for that clarification. But you're also the head of corporate development for Zilliqa Research, correct?
That's right. So that was the role that I was initially hired into when I joined the team back in a bit over a year now. So when I first joined in and started working with Amrit and the rest of the team, and it's just, they're all phenomenal. But, through that process, we've done a number of projects, done a number of interesting things. But one of the things that came out was the gap that we identified, which we decided to create Zilliqa Capital to fill, which was creating a large pool of capital to help budding entrepreneurs, developers, et cetera, in and around Zilliqa to develop and to really be a true partner to Zilhive, which is our internal acceleration fund. We're able to basically help their dollars stretch further by investing side by side with them at the seeding level, but we can also track through Series A, B, C, D, and beyond in ways that we haven't been able to do before, and where we have to rely on kind of next level investors like, the Tim Drapers of the world or the Mark Cubans of the world, et cetera, to come in. So that's where we identified the gap. So my role in Zilliqa Research is probably going to go by the wayside in the near term, and I'm full time now in Zilliqa Capital.
So they roped you.
I don't know if it's roped, but
that was a joke. Don't worry about that. Was a joke.
No, well, what's great is you come into a team that's so entrepreneurial, and everyone's kind of like, how can we benefit this? How can we create something real? How can we create solutions? And that's one of the things I really love about working with the team at Zilliqa, and of course with Amrit is, we saw an opportunity and we're like, let's grab it and let's do what we can for the community, and that's really what it's all about.
Would you say it's still very much an entrepreneurial or maybe even startup feel would be the right word? Is it very much still startup feel there, where the lines of what you do any given day could potentially be blurred, within reason? But does it still have that feel on the inside of Zilliqa and even Zilliqa Capital to a degree?
For sure. I mean, within Zilliqa proper, it certainly feels like a startup, full stop. I mean, everyone's wearing multiple hats. Everyone's trying to say like, hey, can I help you out with this? Oh, I know that guy. Let me introduce you to them. Oh, I've got a great idea for a project. Let's see if we can tackle it. It really has that startup feel. And what's amazing is the team is still physically dispersed. I mean, most folks are here in Singapore, but you've got a good contingent out in Europe. You've got folks in Dubai, folks in India, folks everywhere. But everyone's kind of really just pulling together. So it definitely feels entrepreneurial. And then with Zilliqa Capital, it's we're certainly building from scratch. You know, it's at this point, it's Omri and myself, but we've got tremendous support from the team at Zilliqa that's pulling for us as well. And then, of course, we have got a lot of amazing feedback from people in the community, just helping out with potential ideas for deals or for other things as we're looking to grow the company.
So you're currently based out of Singapore?
That's right. I'm here in Singapore. I've been here now a bit over a year. That's
now
right.
With this, I'll call it a transition for lack of a better word, but moving more into Zilliqa Capital and is less into even grammatically correct, and moving somewhat out of, even though that's a wrong way to say it, Zilliqa Research. Is Singapore the best place for you still? Would it be somewhere like London? Would it be back in the States? Where do you see yourself, given that you have the focus that you've talked about, and of course more we'll talk about in a little bit?
Singapore still remains the best place for Zilliqa Capital, and certainly for myself as kind of the guy who's kind of carrying most of the water right now. You know, if you look at Singapore, and especially look at what our target is for Zilliqa Capital, we're really focused on ASEAN and India specifically as a target geography for the opportunities that we see. The main thrust behind Zilliqa Capital, not only in helping to grow Zilliqa, which is based in Singapore, but from a broader perspective is really focused around financial inclusion. So if you look at the ASEAN and Indian region specifically, in a number of these countries, 60 to 70% of the people fall into the unbanked or underbanked, meaning they're not being served with savings opportunities or investment opportunities or insurance or anything. And they're not even attached to existing systems as well. So for us, finding solutions in payments, remittances, lending, investment, and areas like that create tremendous opportunity for financial inclusion, and really allows for these things to be based here in Singapore specifically. So it makes a ton of sense to be here. And also Singapore, just where it is kind of a birdseed into FinTech, into a lot of things that are happening in the area. Certainly with Zilliqa being a partner in the first Singapore dollar stablecoin with our partners at Xfers. You know, I was reading something the other day where now Singapore dollar is now the third most dollarized digital currency behind the US dollar and euro, which is tremendous when you think about how few people there are here in Singapore, you know, like 5 million.
I think you're something like a quarter of the population of Florida.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm in Florida, and you're a quarter of our population.
It's tremendous. It's tremendous, but you know, Singapore is a dynamic hub. There's a vibrant digital asset crypto community here. The government is quite supportive of a lot of things we have going on. You know, one of our board members, Professor David Lee, he's a professor of blockchain at Singapore University of Social Sciences. He's very active in the community here. He was an early investor in Zcash. And it's just, we feel like we get a lot of support here in Singapore, and it's certainly the right place to be for what we're looking to achieve.
Well, I love hearing that, but something strikes me as you say that, and I almost wonder if it transcends your job. Because when I look through your background, I also see that for maybe more than 2 years now or so, you've been an advisor for Reserve.
That's right.
So those folks in the crypto space, especially in the utility token space, would know potentially RSR and RSV as the two cryptocurrencies associated with the Reserve project. Where I'm going with this is this something big? That seems to be that there's a personal interest in certain things. There's a personal interest in achieving something to do around this area of underserved markets. You talked about the unbanked already, those without insurance and investment vehicles. Is this a larger drive for you to see stuff? I'm using colloquial language here, but to see things such as DeFi and OpenFinance, is that a personal drive for you?
Yes, you know, this is something that I've been really passionate about since my days back at AllianceBernstein. When I was there, one of the things that I was struck after a number of years in the financial industry was the disparity of opportunity for kind of accretive alpha driven investments for folks that are not accredited or folks that don't have a ton of capital. So when I was there at AllianceBernstein, we created liquid retail alternatives, which were effectively mutual fund wrappers for hedge fund products or private equity products. So basically delivering that type of alpha for a very low fee. And that was something at the time that I said, what I found was that you can be creative with delivering these type of things, and you don't need to charge 2 and 20 type of fees to get it done. So it really has struck me from a long time now that I really want to try to bridge these gaps of financial inclusion, financial access, and now with Zilliqa, certainly with the Reserve project at the time, but now with Zilliqa specifically in Zilliqa Capital, it's the perfect storm where you've got this fantastic protocol built out of Singapore that's still unknown in many circles, but has had tremendous growth. I mean, last year, I think our coin grew 1,700% compared to 400 or so for ETH and 300 or so for BTC. And we've announced the Poly bridge. We have the Binance bridge, pancake swap going on as well, and there's a Zil ETH bridge on tap. So there's a lot of things coming down the pike, and so many folks still are not aware of Zilliqa. So for me, from a background in traditional finance, focusing on fundamentals driven research, fundamentals driven analysis and decision making, it's the perfect place to be. It's based in Singapore, and we have this opportunity to really create something impactful to give people access that they've never had access to before. And DeFi helps create that as well. So it's certainly something I've been passionate about for a long time, whether you call it democratization of access or financial inclusion. But I certainly feel that there's something that can be done in this digital asset crypto space to help benefit people. And that's really one of the things I'm super passionate about. And I know Amrit feels the same.
Well, good. Thank you for that, because I wanted to put that in there. I just saw the few things in your background that made me think it looks like there's an overarching drive and overarching purpose. It does also look that you've accomplished what you've accomplished by focusing on really a number of roles related to strategy. Strategy, when I look over your resume, I would have to say that if we had to do the thing we all roll our eyes at and don't like and put you into one category and say, what part of the business spectrum are you in? What are of the functional roles? I would say you're a strategy guy. It looks like that's how you were developed through your career. And I understand that some people will hear that and think I was grammatically incorrect. I meant those words the exact way I said them. But I would also say it's where strategy meets development. Would you say that's a pretty accurate assessment from an external person you just met right now?
Yeah, no, I think that's spot on, and I think you've taken me a bit aback because I think you've read me very well in that I consider myself at forefront, in one word, a strategist. Strategic planning and corp dev used to be the roles that I always used to love the most, because it was really, when it boils down to it, it's really finding solutions. That's your job. If you were to boil down from strategist or corp dev, is finding solutions when you're launching products, finding solutions when you're doing a merger and acquisition deal, finding solutions when you're building investments or raising capital. And all of that comes down to strategy. And so for me, I think you've hit the nail on the head. Strategy is certainly one of my things that I'm most passionate about in general, and certainly something that's kind of driven me over time. And certainly is one of the best tools I've put in my toolkit over time, is kind of being able to be open-minded, being pragmatic and not dogmatic about things, and always believing that there's a solution, and always believing that there's always something you can do to figure something out, has always been my perspective.
Yeah. And I love that perspective of what you just shared on perspective, because I think it's too easy for some, if depending on what level you are in business or other roles you may have, I think it's easy for people to look at someone with a background of by the way, full disclosure of why I'm on this topic. I give myself, in my own business, in my own disregarded entity, I call myself the director of business development. And all too often I meet people who think, oh, that's basically the head salesperson. And in a way, yes. But in
Yeah,
another way, no, it's very much a strategy oriented role that intersects with these other things. So your
that's
perspective
right.
on perspective was very helpful there. There are, of course, other parts of your background. Look, I'm going more into your background than I do with most people. And I want to be clear why. This is for you, Michael. This is for everybody watching, is that it can be intimidating when you start talking about things like venture capital, when you start talking about things like investment vehicles. As much as we all love the space, if you're watching this, right, we all love this space. I understand, right? That can be, and I want to just share the idea that everybody who's in it feels that way about it too.
Yeah.
So let me give that background that I think has been circulating about you. You know, there's stuff circulating about you because you're moving into this position. You are also a founding member or co-founder of several ventures. I'm checking my notes over here. And a lot of these tend to be venture capital or investment organizations that are really, really connected to blockchain technologies. So Ether Capital, Bitfinance, the Institute for Blockchain Innovation, and Quail Creek Ventures. So a number of VC and investment organizations. What does that what did those experiences do for you, or those experiences do for you rather, excuse me, and how do you think they've shaped you and prepared you for what you've chosen to undertake right now? Because those are career capping types of um, uh, job experiences for a lot of people. So can you walk me through those types of experiences a little bit more?
Sure. I think stepping out of the traditional asset management space, and when I say traditional, I mean working for large institutions. So, I used to work for Société Générale, which was one of the largest French banks, and for their affiliates, so like Trust Company of the West, which managed about 200 billion US at the time. And it's one thing to be doing transactional work, biz dev work, product launching, investments, et cetera. For a large institution, you kind of have this nicely built roof over your head, and you kind of feel secure as long as you don't screw things up too badly. Um, Once you start moving into the entrepreneurial space, and certainly, Quail Creek, or you touched on, Bitfinance, and certainly Ether Capital, there's no roof, and also, and many times there's no floor
There's
either.
no floor.
Uh,
I was waiting on that
uh,
part.
you're kind of just taking a jump into the fog and saying, I hope it works out. But part of that is also knowing that if you have a good idea and there's something behind it that's structurally sound, you've got a decent chance at least having a conversation with folks and at least being able to put something together. So, I look at Ether Capital way back in 2017. I was living in Hong Kong working on a project when I got together with my co-founders at the time. And we said, look, there's a lot going on in the space, but not everybody has a wallet. Not everybody has a ledger or a treasure. Not everybody knows how to remember their keys. Why don't we try to put something together that's accessible, that anyone or their grandmother theoretically could invest in, and let's do it something that's simple. So that's why I said, look, why don't we make this a publicly traded entity that anyone could buy the shares of, that we can try to get into portfolios for traditional asset managers that want exposure to the space, and let's try to put something together like that. And that's exactly what we did. So, we raised about 45 million at the time, and then we did a reverse takeover of a shell company in Canada, but we publicly listed the first Ethereum focused investment company. Within a short amount of time, we got ourselves covered by two small cap analysts, which for anyone that's familiar with equity trading is a very difficult thing to do, to get covered by an analyst, especially when you're a small cap or even at that point in time, a micro cap. But we were able to get CIBC and another coverage. So, at the end of the day, getting into a role like that where it's equal parts entrepreneurial, but at the same time you're publicly traded, so you have shareholders to answer to. It really answers a lot of questions for you. It also gives you a lot of guidance on how to be patient, how to think through things. And if things aren't going 100%, then you figure out solutions. And so really after that time, it kind of opened my eyes to the opportunities that entrepreneurship drives, the opportunities that you can provide through creating these type of investment vehicles where you are focused on democratization, or you're focused on inclusion. And that certainly comes to bear now with Zilliqa Capital, in the way we're building the company, the way we're thinking about investing, what we've raised, et cetera. It's all about and geared toward financial inclusion and finding real world solutions to real world challenges.
Well, and thank you for letting me go so deep into your background. I don't normally spend that much time on background, but I think that there are developers, there are blockchain enthusiasts, there are, crypto traders that they see opportunity and they want that entrepreneurial spirit. But one thing that I've observed with, especially when we get into the VC land and we get into structured structured programs for development, whether it's on the business side or the technical side, I think we all talk a very long time around decentralization because so many of us share that goal.
Yeah.
But can you speak to this? Maybe, I'm projecting here. I'm assuming, I'm guessing you're going to have this similar experience. If not, let's shut it down and let me know. But I think that so many of us that have that vision, as soon as we start moving for something, as soon as we start taking action, we suddenly realize that, oh, decentralization, openness, all of these things, that didn't mean the process of building the vision was fully decentralized and open yet, right? That's something that comes down the road. And so there's this perception, I believe, that great, all of this stuff is now here for me to utilize. And it can be very disappointing to a lot of people their first time around going through, right, trying to get there. Can you speak to that for a moment and your experiences of, we want to build things, we want to improve the world, but, and it all sounds great, right? You get all these, it's really, I'm ready to go. Okay, sign me up. But there is that moment where after you have that high, so to speak, there can often be a low where people realize, wait a second, that does mean certain things and doesn't. You can tell I'm skirting around the issue here, but I also want to know where that prompt is taking you in your mind.
Sure. No, I think anytime you have a brilliant idea or a not so brilliant idea, but you decide you want to run with it and build something on it, you're going to get your fair number of folks that support you. And then you'll get a fair number of people that, I don't know if you want to call them haters, but people that'll, people that'll give you contrary viewpoints. And then once you kind of recede from that, then you come down to the reality that you need to build something and you need to make something that's valuable in the near, mid, and long term. And the realities of that is basically you need to eat, breathe, drink, whatever you're building all the time. And the goals of these things ultimately are to build something sustainable that if you are going toward the decentralized finance community or toward the DeFi space, certainly you want to find things that can run autonomously. And you want to find solutions that can survive the test of time, but it's very much something that you are going through and being pressured on in many directions from. And many times you need to kind of scramble and pivot and find your own solutions as you're going along. When people ask me, when you look at an investment, what's a good investment? Is it based on metrics? Is it based on analytics, et cetera? I say it really comes down to the team more than anything else. Anyone can have the best idea since sliced bread, but not anybody can say, wow, my sliced bread recipe is not working well. Can I figure out another solution to get to where I want to go? And that's what it comes down to when you're meeting with people. That's what it comes down to. It comes down to drive and problem solving and ability to find ways to deliver an ultimate benefit, but being able to realize that, you can't just keep running into the same doorway. Maybe you need to go around, or maybe you need to go over or something.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's something that's important, being able to be flexible more than anything else when you're building. And certainly for us with Zilliqa Capital, it went through many iterations before we ended up on where we are. We structure the company as an investment holding company. Think about it like a Berkshire Hathaway of blockchain, DeFi, and NFTs. We want the benefits of what we invest in to congregate to the people who are invested in Zilliqa Capital. And ultimately, what we're looking to do is to share the profits of the company with investors. So we're looking to yield out most of what we're profiting to the community that's invested with us. So, that being said, this is a lot of innovation going on as well in terms of structure around Zilliqa Capital, structure of the team. But I think a lot of that really comes down to the entrepreneurial spirit that is really fostered at Zilliqa, and certainly something that we're looking to foster at Zilliqa Capital as well.
Well, I love that. Thank you, because it's a tough conversation. And I have this with some of my marketing students. That there's a tough conversation to bring people up to speed and say that you can literally have, as you said, the best idea. And then someone like me comes in and says, right, but remember, that doesn't mean anybody's going to jump on board, right? Like, talking about market dynamics, sometimes you can have the best product in the world, the widget that solves all the problems, and you put it on shelves and you do everything right, and it doesn't sell.
That's right.
And so there are a lot of complexities, there are a lot of variables. And I'm drilling into your background, of course, because it puts us at ease to know who's there dealing with some of these complexities and these other things. But I do like to do this. I like to say, let's put all of that away for a moment, because at the end of the day, even a connection to Zilliqa and having worked with the organizations we've talked about, whether they're in crypto space or not, at the end of the day, there is something bigger in a way. So if we put away blockchain, if we put away work, if we put away the crypto space, if we bumped into each other on the street, no business together, we just strike up a conversation, what's it likely to be about? And where I'm going with this question is, who are you at your core outside of work? What would we end up talking about? What are the things that make you you?
We'd probably start talking about basketball or sports. Inevitably, even though we may not be talking about work, I think we would migrate towards a discussion around financial inclusion and the opportunities that the crypto marketplace allow for that. It's something that I really believe in. And to me, I think crypto digital asset space is really a tool that delivers that. I think it ultimately comes down to how you feel in general when you look at other people on the street or look at other people in general and say, it would be great if, and for me, it would be great if everybody had the same access. I'm not talking about, taking a pie and splitting in half and saying, okay, everybody gets the same piece of the pie. But what I'm saying is everybody should have the materials to be able to at least make those pies. You know what I mean? For me, it's about access. It's not about a grant. It's not about a gift, though those things are nice and certainly are merited at certain points in time. But for me, it's about access. And growing up, in LA, going to school in Boston, living in Europe, in Asia, all over the place, I've seen many different things, highs and lows. And what I can say above all is that if you're given access and the tools, you at least have a fighting chance at doing something special. And I think that's what really drives me. And I think that's probably what you and I probably would end up talking about. Again, I don't know you very well, but it certainly seems like you're very thoughtful, and coming from a thoughtful position, I think that's probably the way we'd go. I could be wrong.
Yeah, I have a feeling we would start talking about how to change capital situations and capital flows in various places, and all of a sudden we'd be right back at work and say, all right, well,
yeah. So maybe that means I'm just a boring guy.
No, so the audience is everything, right? I'm told that all the time, but then there are other areas where I'm told, man, that's really insightful, and you think, okay, so. Look, I think we'd have quite a bit to talk about, but yeah, it does seem like it'd gravitate back. There seems to be a transition point for you, and this relates to your background, but I'm going somewhere deeper with it. There seems to be a transition point for you sometime around let me call it 2015-ish, maybe a little bit later, where blockchain technologies seem to enter your professional life more and more and more. And almost like you just jumped in to a big pool. That's how the resume reads. But there has to be a spark for that. What was the spark? What was the catalyst for that career transition that happened somewhere between 2015 and 2017? What was that catalyst? What was the introduction to blockchain?
Sure. For me, it was multi-placed. So firstly, having worked at these large institutional asset managers for so many years, really kind of showed me the pros and cons of the traditional capital markets that we're currently invested in or currently observant of. And it really was my oldest son, who I don't remember what year, but he was doing a school project on this Japanese guy, he told me, named Satoshi Nakamoto. And this was back, I think this was around 2014, 2015. I don't remember when. And he said, yeah, this guy's done incredible things. And he's created this thing called Bitcoin. And I've read about it, but it was the fact that he was doing this project in elementary school really jumped out at me. And I started doing a little digging. I'm the kind of guy that falls down rabbit holes easily when I find something that's interesting. And so it was right around that time that I started to think about it and think about the creativity around it and the opportunity around it. But certainly when I came, after I was with TCW and SocGen, we did a management buyout with Carlyle, a sponsor for TCW, and that was a lot of work. But soon
Trust
after
company,
that,
just clarifying for everyone else, trust company of the West, TCW.
TCW, yeah. So after I left there and went to AllianceBernstein, which is an even larger investment manager, after a few years there, I thought, why don't I see what I've built over time in terms of a network, and let's see what I can do from a consultative perspective. Like, let's strike out on my own. My father was a lifelong entrepreneur.
So
And
Bitcoin, that introduction from your son, was that catalyst?
It planted those initial kernels, certainly. And then so when I left AllianceBernstein at the end of 2015, and my father had been a lifelong entrepreneur and really kind of planted those seeds in me as well.
Mm-hmm.
I started to run with my own business. So I created Quail Creek and, started tapping into networks that I had built in Asia, in Europe, in the US. And then from there, when you're networking and you network and you do work and people, at the end of the day, all you have is your reputation. Ultimately that transpired into Ether Capital. And from Ether Capital, I went to other entrepreneurial ventures, and it kind of, it built upon itself. But it was that initial spark was, I think, around 2013, 2014, my son doing a book report on Satoshi Nakamoto.
And you probably thought, well, that's interesting, but that will never change my life. But
You never know.
listen,
You never know.
schoolwork
But
pays off. Not even your own. Schoolwork pays off.
yeah, it pays off in one way or another. But it certainly, when I look back at that and how innocent it was, just an innocent kind of look at what this space has become to now, it's like night and day. Back then you had a very small circles of folks that were thinking about it, and now you have actually real institutional interest. You've got BlackRock, you've got Boney Mellon, you've got Fidelity. Visa, PayPal. You have real players around the globe that are involved. China the other day, I think today, 6 of their major banks put out applications, that people can actually use for the new digital yuan. There are real life things happening right now that started with, a small kernel of something. And I think we're still, I wouldn't, if I was doing a baseball analogy, I don't even think we're in the early innings. I think the game hasn't even started. It's spring training still. So, being a lifelong Dodger fan, and knowing Vero Beach in Florida, at the end of the day, I feel like in many ways we're still there. It's early, and that's the crazy thing.
Well, I agree with you. And speaking of Vero Beach, I drove halfway there the other day.
Yeah.
You're making me wish I had gone the whole way. It's
Uh,
beautiful there. So have
yeah.
you ever gone for any spring training there? Have you ever
Unfortunately, I
gone to see
never
any?
did. I never did, but I certainly followed it
Well, listen,
more.
when you do, give me a call. It's an hour and change from me, but it's not a bad drive.
Yeah.
So I'd love to sit and watch a baseball. I'm not a big baseball fan, right? And so that's something else. I'd love to sit and watch a spring training game with you and talk
Yeah.
about how we can open markets, how we can do those things, because as we
That'd be a
know,
good thing.
the conversation would go that way. So always, anytime you can get to Florida, in business, we look, we don't like horoscopes. Maybe we do in our personal lives, but in business, we don't really use them. But some people think we do because we follow things like E3 and Strengths Finders and MBTI, and all the business people out there, hairs on the back of their neck are raising either in hate or love right now. But are you familiar with MBTI, and do you know your personality type? If so,
I know I'm ENTJ.
ENTJ. Okay.
For whatever that's worth. I mean, this was back from
Well, look,
2003 in business school, so it was a long time ago. But
I'll tell you though
yeah,
that there are people who will be listening to this and watching this and go, "What does this have to do with anything?" Rabbit holes. You have typically when somebody starts talking about a deep dive, I get completely absorbed. You have to be all into it. You're dealing with an NTJ, and look, we're not over here in business believing in horoscopes. I understand from the outside, it sounds like that, but these are ways we communicate personality traits and thought patterns and mental mappings, depending on what the assessment is. So when
sure.
you said rabbit holes, and you talked earlier about being, if you're going to build something, you've got to eat, breathe, and drink it and all of that. And I think too often people misinterpret what people like you and I say. That means they feel like they have to work all the time. No, you have to have balance. You need to hit that spring training game. You need to take a break. You
Yeah,
need to sleep at night.
yeah,
But when people like us say it, even though we may be guilty of not taking those breaks, what we really mean is while you're relaxing, are you still doing at the core of that relaxation, at the core of being you? Is that idea still there? Is it still manifesting? Is it still in
yeah.
your subconscious? Or is it just something you're doing, and putting a bunch of hours into to get rich, but it's not really you? So yeah, so sorry for the detour. I wanted to ask that. Back on the
No. It's you're right.
But
You're
you
right.
remember from, you said about 2003, so you're with me on that. If you still remember from
I'm
that
with you.
point.
I remember we had a whole bunch of work around it and a lot of testing, and
And
so
look, the first time anybody,
they hammered it home. At
yeah, they
USC.
hammered it
So
like, this is not a horoscope. Do not believe in it like that. This is something else. Um, what, how from there, how from that spark of, I believe you said a book report or some type of report from your son,
yeah.
how, we know how you got into blockchain from that point, and thanks for clarifying, but where does Zilliqa come in? How did that happen? Because look, the Zilliqa Observer is a show, but
Yeah.
there's no secret that when we talk about, you're the first to do what you did. You reverse bought the shell company in Canada, got listed, Ethereum, all of that makes perfect sense. But what doesn't make sense to some people is right now, right here, the timing. I think that's a question mark in some people's minds. Why Zilliqa? Why right now?
I was in mid 2019. I was working on another project, and I was approached by one of the members of the broad Zilliqa family, Max Cantelia, and the initial conversation was around, we've got the Zilliqa blockchain. I was not familiar with it at the time, have to admit. And he said, we're looking for different ways to grow the business. We're really building for growth. Why don't you take a look? And so I did, and then, after speaking with Max, and then this conversation continued from mid 2019 all the way till the end of 2019. Spoke with Max, spoke with Juzar on the team, and then ultimately spoke with Omri. And what I saw was a group of entrepreneurs at its core that were really looking to do something impactful. And the fact that, we had this dialogue for about 9 months or so, or plus or minus, to me said that they were really focused on doing the things that needed to be done to grow. And the conversations that I had with them were done in such a way where it was very clear that these were really open-minded entrepreneurs,
Mhm.
which I liked. And a long time ago, I started honoring the kind of the no, I don't know if I can say no assholes, I don't know, but the no rude people
Free to
rule.
say that here.
Yeah, so the no assholes rule. So, you know, when I left the institutional asset management world and started going into the entrepreneurial space, I really started to think, if I'm going to put all my time and effort into a project, it's got to be with people that I like.
Mhm.
And that's one of the things that struck me about Zilliqa. The more I dug in and dove in and saw about how they've solved sharding and all the other things that they're doing, which, you know, Ethereum is still, in many ways, still working on resolving some of those challenges. I was like, wow, this is amazing. This is very impressive. And so when the time came around January, when I was offered the role to join the team, I kind of jumped at it. And so I was on a plane to Singapore, and then kind of the rest is history. And certainly nobody could have planned for a year like 2020. But despite that, and it certainly hasn't been easy, I think, on anyone, the team at Zilliqa has been quite resilient and quite focused, and just point by point have been hammering home every single thing they've been saying they're going to do. You know, we said we're going to start staking, we started staking. We said we're going to build multiple chain bridges, and we've been doing that. You know, and we continue from an entrepreneurial perspective, currently through Zilhive and in the not too distant future through Zilliqa Capital, to invest in and help build the community. And we're being noticed. That's the point. You know, so when one of your portfolio companies gets, such as Mintable, gets invested in by Mark Cuban, he's fully aware of Zilliqa. And you never know what else is going to come down the pike from that direction either. So, you know, at the end of the day, you know, I do have to admit that when I was first approached about the project back in 2019, I was not aware of Zilliqa, but I certainly am now, and certainly would not want to be anywhere else. And that's why, you know, my commitment to Zilliqa Capital and my commitment to the team is 100%. And certainly building something special to solve some real world challenges is really the ultimate goal. And if we can help the community around us, both here in ASEAN and India, but also in Europe and the US, then that's even better. So that's kind of what brought me to Zilliqa, and certainly what's kept me here has really been the entrepreneurial spirit and just the great team dynamic. I mean, anyone that's interacted with anyone with our team at Zilliqa knows that it's just a great group of people that are really good people, and good people to work with, good people to talk to, and certainly people that don't mind rolling up their sleeves and getting in the weeds with you when you need to figure out a solution.
When you got on the plane to go to Singapore, I believe that was from you were mainly based out of LA, correct?
Yeah, I mean, over the years, LA has been my hub. I mean, I've launched companies around the world. You know, when Ether Capital is based out of Toronto, so I was on a plane every week to Toronto. You know, but LA has always been the hub. So yeah, that's correct.
So when you think about flying home, when you thought about flying home at that point, you know, 2015 to 2019, LA was home.
I mean, plus or minus, you know, like I said, over that time, I was also in Toronto, in
Okay.
Estonia, and Romania, in Italy, and also in Hong Kong. So I've been kind of
Right.
all over.
But the reason I bring that up is because I want to take a moment and since you know this isn't a, necessarily a journalistic venture, I just want to clear a space out and acknowledge you for a moment as a human being. That we're talking about, you were offered the position in January 2020. You began as head of corporate development at Zilliqa in February 2020. As the pandemic was spreading internationally, and that's right about 2 to 6 weeks, depending on where you are in the planet, before lockdowns began, before everything else. So you made this major move in the sense that you do seem like you were truly global
Yeah.
prior, but you made this move, a significant move that for the first time in what seems like a while was going to lock you into a primary location anyway. And then you literally get locked into the location
Yeah.
in you know, the
Yeah.
pandemic. So I just want to carve out a space and let people realize, because this is all about putting a face on what we do, on what all of us do. And so I just want to say that that is really, you know, that's something big. And thank you for doing what you've done through that point, because it would be very easy, I think, for people to say, you know what, I believe in this, but the world put a wrench in it. And you're here, you're doing it. And I just want to carve out some space to say thank you for doing that. And thank you for, because that cannot have been easy.
No, no. I mean, it certainly wasn't easy. I mean, before the whole thing started, I was reading already about the pandemic starting. So I was kind of like the only person on my flight with a mask on. And before I left my kids, I bought them a bunch of 95 masks, and everybody thought I was crazy at the time. But for better or worse, it turned out the way it did.
Mhm.
And my last time home was actually in December when my father passed away. But
Sorry to
it's
hear
definitely
that.
good to be. Oh, thank you. It was definitely good to be back to see my kids. But ultimately, what we're focused on right now is building this, getting it off the ground. And I think as the pandemic subsides, as vaccines come in and things get easier, then I think you go back to, I don't know if it's the new normal or whatever it is, but I think
Whatever.
it gets a lot easier to get back on a plane and to certainly be global again. But right now, for what we're doing, what we're building, being here in Singapore is critical. And it's it's again, it's really great to have the support of the team at Zilliqa, and the community is just great in its own right.
And you certainly have my respect for everything I just said. And look, I know that we don't go out and do what we do for respect. As you said, there are always going to be haters, but putting a face on it, I hope that people see that there are folks behind, good people like you behind the scenes, working their asses off, making sacrifices, and doing what we believe in. On that note, though,
Thank you.
I absolutely, I do want to change focus to what are some of the hopes that you have for Zilliqa Capital looking forward? What are the things you look? I don't want to give you an annual review and talk to you in a year and say, okay, those three things we spoke about. That's not where I'm going with it. But
Yeah.
what are some of the hopes you have for Zilliqa Capital and this new entity?
Uh, my main hopes are really to get to where we want to be, and in terms of being able to put capital to work and then having impactful results. That's the main thing. So being able to be a good partner to the folks at Zilhive, to be able to work alongside with them in terms of growing the community, growing the development from an acceleration and seed perspective. But then Zilliqa Capital in its own right, our goal is to be one of the largest, if not the largest, I don't know if you want to call it venture capital funds or companies out of Asia. I mean, that's the goal. So, and that's what we're working towards. We've got a great team around the table, as I mentioned, our board of directors before that are on our website, zilliqacapital.com. And then, of course, my partner Amrit, he's a solid guy, both from a technological perspective, but just an all-around good person and someone that I enjoy working with.
Do you foresee, and when we're talking about the ASEAN market and kind of adding India in with that, do you foresee taking people with ideas, people with development capabilities, people really trying to move and shake and create open environments? Do you foresee taking them and sort of having a grooming vetting process, moving them through Zilhive, moving them through various maybe training or information about how VC works? Or is this possibly more direct? And let me even preempt your answer. I know it's going to be a hybrid, right? We all know it's a hybrid. It's a combination of both. So
Yeah.
if we could, can we go a little bit deeper space and get your insight on whether it's something as simple as what the split, the predefined split in the quote unquote business plan for Zilliqa Capital is, or maybe your idealized version of here's what the sweet flow would be.
Sure. Sure. I think when we look at the deal flow, or if you want to call it portfolio construction of Zilliqa Capital, the idea is certainly to be a partner to Zilhive, meaning we would help them stretch their dollar further. So for any investments they would be looking to make, we would look to make those alongside them, and certainly around the table with our board of directors, if there's an opportunity for them to participate as well, or key investors as well, that's what we would like to do. But as we talk about growing the business and kind of on a more macro level, we're looking at deal flow that would create both current yield as well as kind of long-term PE/VC style value. Because Zilliqa Capital is structured as an investment holding company. It's basically an evergreen permanent capital vehicle as well. And so what we're looking to do is the majority of our profits would be effectively yielded out to investors, but the balance would be retained by the company for, and intended to be retained by the company for evergreen investments into new opportunities or top-up opportunities. And so the way I look at it is certainly a split in some way, shape, or form between, you know, revenue sharing, profit sharing, equity, tokens, potentially investing in other funds if there's an opportunity that makes sense, et cetera. But ultimately for us, it's really about not just writing a check, but finding good teams that we can help along through the process of from that initial seed level through when they grow larger, and then we're sitting alongside potentially investors from Silicon Valley as well. But ultimately, for us, the main goal is really being flexible in the way we structure the deals, but also trying to be additive to the process for our portfolio companies, you know, trying to help them along, trying to help them grow, and trying to make sure that, you know, we're there for them to bounce ideas off of as well. Because, you know, sometimes people don't really assess and put a true value on just having someone out there that you can bounce an idea off of. And for me, that's something that I really enjoy. You know, when I was still in university in Boston, Brandeis, I used to be a teacher's assistant, and part of that was teaching small groups of students. I love that. I love to teach, and even through my career at TCW and further afield, I've done seminar courses at local business schools in the LA area, you know, teaching about capital markets, teaching about M&A, and I enjoy teaching. So part of that, I think, segues straight into VC, et cetera. When we're working with people that are trying to figure out solutions, it's teaching moment. And the teaching goes both ways. So again, from a portfolio construction perspective, we're certainly looking for a balance between current yield, because we want the company to be profitable, but at the same time looking to lock in long-term value. We're certainly looking at this as a network effect between us and our board of directors, and certainly strategic investors that come into Zilliqa Capital. And at the end of the day, we're working side by side with Zilliqa and Zilhive to try to grow the broader ecosystem and the broader capabilities in both ASEAN and India, certainly, but global as well, because we can be geographically agnostic in our investing if we see great opportunities that are in Europe or the US or the Middle East, et cetera. You know, we live in such a global world that it's hard to say, oh, well, whatever works in the US can't work in Singapore or vice versa. Certainly there are certain projects that would be specifically tailored to the region, but that also doesn't mean that we should turn a blind eye to opportunities further afield. And that's also why we constructed our board in such a way that it's global in nature, where we've got folks from, you know, most of the major markets in Asia, through India, through the US and Europe.
And don't forget, you want to unseat no code as having the largest Series A. Webflow currently holds that distinction with the largest Series A. And I know secretly, we've never talked about this, but I'm going to guess you're aware of that fact and want to off that as the largest, right? So somewhere deep down in, you're like, wouldn't it be nice if blockchain could dethrone the no code space as the top Series A?
It would be a good thing.
It would be a good thing. And I think just translating any part of that it seems pretty clear that, right, yeah, there are going to be some projects that graduate through Zilhive that then are looking to go on to Series A, or maybe they even need VC prior to that. Right. But then there are going to be complete other different companies that build something up, and all of a sudden they're in this tailspin, positive tailspin, if you will, if such a thing exists, where there's interest. Somebody may have even approached to buy them or talked about investment, and they have no idea what to do. You and your team and your board of directors and Amaret might be a very good point of contact at that point to say, I'm in the space, but I don't know how to respond to what's being presented.
No, I think that's true. I mean, again, for us, we look to be there to support our portfolio companies, but also to be there just to make sure that they're thinking properly about everything. You know, one of my board members, Jeff Zerlin from Axie Infinity, when I first met him, I wrote the NDA that they were using at the time. I don't know if they still use it, but for me, it was more like, here, take this, not for any fee or anything. Just
Right.
it's about helpful. It's about being helpful to folks, and I think that's part of the responsibility of being in this position, is being able to be helpful when people need help. Because the flip side is true for me. When I have needed my own help, I think back to the people that really were helpful, and certainly want to try to be in that same direction when I can have that same opportunity.
Now, with all of that said, the primary business model is most likely you're a steward of the investor's money. They're making an investment, and you are actively seeking opportunities. So I would imagine most of the portfolio is going to come from internally identified potential candidates.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's the traditional funnel approach. You take in deals as they come. I call it like the best available athlete, whether they're from our board or from our network or directly sourced, et cetera. And then you kind of funnel down to where do you want to make your investments. It goes through our investment committee, and then our board would approve or disapprove. But ultimately for us, it's really about making sure we have a seat at the table at all the good deals. And that's we want to just make sure we have great deal flow. And to your point, we do have a fiduciary duty to our investors to generate the highest amount of alpha possible. But at the same time, we have a social mission for financial inclusion. And I think those two things are not diametrically opposed. I firmly believe that.
So obviously this question is going to be understood very clearly by us, but when I'm talking about it, I mean, I'm not asking for names, right? But I'm going to phrase it in a very generic way. So speaking of all of that, who are the investors, right? There are folks in Zilliqa land, if you will, that are utility token holders, but have significant assets. They may have diverse portfolios themselves. They may be angel investors. They could be VCs themselves. Who is what's the type of investor you're looking for? And are there open investment opportunities, or is this more of you mentioned BlackRock before. Is it more like a BlackRock situation where that's great, I may have all the money in the world, but they don't particularly care about, someone out there having a couple billion dollars?
Sure. I think from a Zilliqa Capital perspective, we're going to seek to raise assets from wherever it makes sense. So certainly that'll probably be a mix of high net wealth individuals, family foundations, family offices, endowments, and institutional investors. I'm a bit handcuffed to how much I can say by our counsel, but ultimately, at least for right now, we're really focused on those folks. But I think over time, we are looking to, if possible, open that up to a broader community globally. But certainly, to your point, a lot of the existing investors are high net wealth individuals and institutional type investors.
Also looking at who people are, I was looking at the board, and it seems to be there's a significant amount of talent from the United States specifically. And something you've touched on before, a lot of those directors seem to have specialties in securitization.
Yeah.
Is there anywhere public or that can be made public that we're going with that? Because look, people like me sit down and review this material, and right, there aren't public financial statements to review at this point. So what I have is your board of directors. And when I do my deep dives, which are deep, right? When I do those deep dives, I mean, you have folks who could go launch a security in California tomorrow. Well, okay, the due diligence and the paperwork and all that would happen in months.
Right.
Why that specific team is what I'm getting at. Why that team? Why so US heavy? Why so securitization heavy? It sends a very, like, I can answer that question in my own head. There's a missing puzzle piece. And I'm not asking you to, right? Like, I want to be clear. This is not a gotcha. I don't do those.
No, of course. No, look, it's very simple. I'm a big believer in the best available athletes. And I'm also a big believer in sitting around the table with good people that are intelligent, that are thoughtful, and that also have good deal flow. And everybody on our team, whether they're a direct investor running their own investment fund, a technologist in their own right, or an entrepreneur, has all kind of left their mark in different ways. So, if you look through the list, Rumi Morales, partner and head of venture at Outlier Ventures, she's based out of Chicago, but Outlier is based out of the UK. She used to run CME Ventures, clearly with CME and Bitcoin futures, et cetera. She was quite active at the time. You look at Miko Matsumura, general partner of Gumi Cryptos, early investor in Celsius, that's effectively collateralized lending, something that's very useful, and certainly some skill sets that we'd love to port here. But also he has a direct connection to Japan, which is very important in this side of the world as well. Nishal Shetty, CEO of WazirX, India's largest crypto exchange, but they're also owned by Binance. And he co-manages a $50 million VC fund focused on Indian FinTech, which again, critically important for what we want to do. Jaehan Chu, he's based out of Hong Kong. He's the managing partner of Geographic Capital. Certainly, he's US educated, but he's been based back in HK for quite a while now. Single digit investor, holder of BlockFi, owns the NFT domain, deep in the BSN network in China. So, again, somebody super intelligent, but also somebody that is a great person to bounce ideas off of. We also have Professor David Lee, who is the professor of blockchain here, Singapore University of Social Sciences, who I mentioned before. Ben Tsai, directly from a structuring perspective, somebody I used to work with directly at Alliance Bernstein, except we've switched places. At the time, he was based here in Asia, and I was based in LA. Now we've kind of switched. But, Wave Financial, where he's president, I think maybe 3-4 months ago, they tokenized about $600 million worth of whiskey out of Japan. And then, of course, Mason Borda, the CEO of TokenSoft, one of the leading, security token manufacturers out there. And then, of course, as I mentioned, Jeff Zerlin from Axie Infinity in the NFT gaming space. So, if you look around the table, collectively, we've had people who over time have invested or managed, north of $1 billion in AUM, in assets under management. You have folks that have done and left their mark in many ways in this kind of early time frame of the digital asset space. And these are all really good people. I wanted to build a diverse board that was thoughtful, that were, who I consider to be good people, and who ultimately I thought would allow us to deliver on that fiduciary duty to our investors at Zilliqa Capital. So it's less so about securitization and more so about people with multiple skill sets. And certainly, I think securitization is just another form of tokenization. And the way I look at it, that creates a lot of opportunity as you go forward in the future in terms of sharing assets, sharing opportunities, and ways for basically to allow people to have kind of a seat at the table from a financial inclusion and access perspective as well.
And when I look at the list as well, there are some other thoughts that come into mind. One is something I picked up on because we've talked about the ASEAN market a lot, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. But, when I spoke with Amrit about talking to you, he mentioned APAC, Asia Pacific.
Yeah.
And I almost wonder, right, is there a signal? Is there anything? Because, again, looking at that board, US heavy, but also inroads into Japan, inroads into Australia. And it makes me wonder if we're talking about APAC, is APAC really, we know we're talking ASEAN plus India, right? That's been signaled, that's been clear.
Sure.
Is there an effort to move more into Japan, for instance, which would be a major market for Zilliqa, Australia, which would be, I think it could be a major market because if you look at the social rankings of Zilliqa searches, Australia is somewhere, I think, in the top 5 or top 10 in terms of nations that, but that we can imagine that's due to proximity. Japan, though, even with the proximity, is not. Is there any signal or is there anything we can take away about Japan, Australia, Micronesia, Macronesia, Polynesia? Is this more APAC or is it ASEAN plus India?
I mean, certainly from a Zilliqa Capital perspective, ASEAN and India is where we see tremendous opportunity. But we are geographically agnostic in terms of what we're looking to for opportunities. And certainly, having Miko on the board gives us direct link to Japan. And I've worked in Japan before. I think it's a tremendous market. And of course, Ben Sai's done tremendous things in Japan as well. Having the connection to HK, Jeff Zerlin's based out of Korea. To me, ASEAN and India is certainly just a step away from APAC, and our ambitions are global. When I come down to from the pure Zilliqa perspective, I know that there's many initiatives in play to make sure that we're listed in all the important markets, and certainly I would list US, Japan, and other European markets amongst them. And I wouldn't ignore Australia as well. So while I can't directly say, yes, we are doing this, I can certainly say that there's a concerted effort by the broad team to get as much exposure as possible for Zilliqa on a global basis. And certainly APAC, to me, is not too far away from ASEAN and India.
And I know I haven't spoken about South America and Africa, but I'm going to make an assumption here. As an advisor to Reserve, I would imagine those are very commonly in your mind as well. Reserve being more directly linked to South America, but there have been multiple discussions of how Reserve, Zilliqa, and various others, it's not an exclusive domain to those two, but how various others can deal with some of the liquidity and currency supply issues in Africa, especially. So would I be, look, I'm not trying to probe for anything deep, because you very clearly and very well laid out what Zilliqa Capital is about, right? I don't want to project my own, but just for anyone wondering, like, hey, if you truly global in ambition, are you forgetting Brazil? Are you forgetting South Africa? Are you forgetting Nigeria? Are you forgetting Egypt? It looks to me like I could sum that up for people and say, no, I don't think that's happening because of the talent I see on the board, plus your own individual background. I would imagine no continent is being overlooked.
No, nothing's being overlooked. Just also at the same time, we want to make sure, you can't be everything to everyone all at once. And we want to make sure right now, just like Zilliqa did for many years, is stick to our knitting. And our knitting right now is kind of getting up and running, putting the capital to work. But like I said, we are geographically agnostic. So if there's an amazing deal, like a Flutter Wave or something coming out of Nigeria, we're not going to say no to it, if it makes sense. The same holds true for something coming out of South America or ways to collaborate with other folks. We're very open-minded to any of these things. And that's why in our investment mandate, wanted to make sure that we can be geographically agnostic.
So what do you see as the future of blockchain?
It's hard to say. I don't know if it just means that you have this global OpenFi type of network where there's kind of some kind of hybridized, decentralized and centralized system that gives people the tools that they need to be able to handle, payments, remittances, investments, insurance, etc. Is it a way that creates DAOs where you can build capabilities for people to kind of build their own favorite mutual fund or build their own favorite investments? And the same holds true from NFTs and gaming. And will those NFTs end up being tokenized themselves? I think the sky is wide open, and I'm not even getting into neural networks or anything above and beyond that. It's just, there's a lot of opportunity to take this in so many directions. And certainly if you look at just a traditional financial space and how creative people have been within the confines of the traditional regulatory space, you flip that over to the digital asset world and, it's compounded in many, many ways. So it's hard for me to say it's going to be this way or it's going to be that way. But I think what it does is it allows people who are creative and people who want to find solutions to really do that. And my only hope is that in markets where, crypto is kind of questionable whether there's a value to it, I think ultimately the answer should be yes, but the answer should come down to, why don't we define what that sandbox is that you can work in and then say, go to town, and I'm not talking about necessarily India 100%. I'm talking right smack home in the US. where, we've got good folks coming at the table, whether it's Yellen or Gensler, et cetera. And it'd be amazing if they would just say, here is the sandbox. Here are what the regulations are. Here's what you can do. And then let people go to work. I mean, I think, as an American, when I started Ether Capital, it's great that we did it in Canada, and Canadians are very entrepreneurial and they have tremendous capabilities. But look, ETH Capital should have been, there's no reason it shouldn't have been listed in the US. And the same holds true for the first Bitcoin ETF. ETH Capital is sub-advising on that along with Purpose Financial. And these are good people and intelligent people. They raised like $1 billion in 3 weeks, but it's insane that type of dynamic growth, that type of kind of inventiveness, et cetera, didn't happen in the US.
I think is there a larger issue for you that then limits access? It limits an average American. And we're not talking about anymore about limitations of people who are unbanked. We're talking about average Americans who may have a $75,000, maybe developers, $150,000 a year income, who cannot access these capital markets because they don't have a business in Canada, or they don't have the proper structure to invest in foreign assets, or they don't have the reporting capability. So it seems like it all ties back to that openness, that decentralization, but being cognizant that we have to play within the sandbox that's provided.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's one thing to have regulations to protect people. It's another thing to block people. And I think right now the regulations are much more in a blocking manner than in a pure, true sense defining factor, where if there was a truly defined regulatory environment in all the major markets, then you'd be able to synthesize the way things are done. You'd be able to grow things on multiple levels that currently you're not able to do. And you've got a lot of creative people at the table in the digital asset space. And you could only imagine what it would be when people say, the earth is round and now go to town, as opposed to saying, no, the earth is flat and it falls off here. And, but if you go at this hour at that time and the sun is at this part of the sky, then maybe it'll be okay. Yeah. That's very difficult. And if somebody raises 4 billion and then they get slapped on the wrist for 10 million, well, that's fine. But it'd be much better if somebody said, you can go raise 4 billion and you'll need to pay 5 million to do this, this, and this. Right. And nobody gets slapped on the wrist. That would be ideal.
And see, I find myself agreeing with the SEC a lot, but disagreeing in the fact that in the areas where they say something shouldn't happen, they're not creating a counter proposal of how should it happen. And so I'm just translating that to my own language, to my own thought of, I don't think anybody's trying to stifle innovation, but innovation is getting stifled because if you say, well, we're not going to have, we can't launch a certain type of token, or we can't launch it in a certain way, fine, right? We won't. Yeah. But what's the alternative? So I don't want to get us too far off on that tangent because it seems like something else we can talk about in Singapore or in Vero Beach.
Proverbial rabbit hole.
Yeah. So final question, what did I miss? What's been on your mind? What did you look forward to saying while we were chatting that I just didn't go down that path? I didn't go down that rabbit hole. What did I miss? And what would you like people to know at the end of this conversation?
I think you touched on all the major points from my perspective. I think ultimately, if I was going to say that I'd want folks to remember certain things, it's that, look, Zilliqa as a protocol is something people should be aware of. It has very high throughput, it has very high security, and is tailor-made for kind of the DeFi space, for NFTs and gaming, et cetera. And it's got an entrepreneurial team behind it that's kind of around the clock, literally, because we're global, focused on growing the business. Yeah, growing the business.
In my first couple of videos, as opposed to now, you guys are wearing me out.
Yeah, and then when you look at Zilliqa Capital, what we want people to know is look, we're really trying to add value to the Zilliqa ecosystem, but in a broader sense, to the whole financial ecosystem in ASEAN, in India. You can look to APAC and abroad, but what we're really looking to do is broaden financial inclusion, create real-world solutions to real-world challenges, and have an impact. And if we can do that while sharing with the community, then all the better. Those are the main points.
This week's giveaway, sponsored by Zilliqa, is going to be for another one of those awesome Zilliqa mugs. You'll see the giveaway as a Twitter-only event between Tuesday, April 6th and Friday, April whatever the following Friday is of 2021. Look for it during that time for more details. I'm still looking for the first 2 contest winners. I'm wondering what's going on. Are emails getting lost? Am I missing DMs? If you're thedaymoney@gmail, with money spelled M-O-N-I-Y, or tarot2marseille84@gmail, please DM me at ChaseRaz on Twitter or Telegram, at Zilliqa Observer on Twitter, or better yet, just send me an email with your address to contest@zilliqaobserver.com and I'll get your merch out to you. Alright, due to the length of this episode and the awesome information Michael provided, I'm going to forgo my final thoughts, especially since I left more of my riffing and question lead-ins intact within this episode than I normally do. Let's call it a day. See you next time.